The derelict floated in the void like a tomb, silent, forgotten, rusted by time and cosmic radiation. For 2 millennia, it had drifted through the Kepler expanse, a ghost among the stars. Inside, something still lived. Barely. Captain Lyran had stopped counting the years after the first century. Her body, once elegant and strong, had failed her long ago. The biosustenance systems had malfunctioned during the battle, trapping her in a half-life between existence and oblivion. Her flesh had withered, rotted in places where the failing ship's atmosphere leaked toxins. Her bones showed through translucent skin. Yet her mind remained, sharp, aware, screaming into the darkness where no one could hear. She had tried everything. Emergency beacons that had died with the main reactor. Manual override panels that crumbled under her deteriorating fingers. Even the escape pod had been damaged beyond function, its hatch fused shut by ancient fire. Her crew was long dead, their bodies decomposed to dust in the lower decks. Only she remained, preserved by a cruel malfunction in her command chair's medical interface, kept alive but unable to die, unable to escape. 2,000 years of solitude. 2,000 years of madness kept at bay only by the discipline of her military training and the fading hope that someone, someday, might find her. Evan Cross adjusted the scanner display, frowning at the readings. His exploration vessel, the Meridian, had detected an anomaly, metallic, ancient, and definitely artificial. In 20 years of deep space salvage and exploration, he had seen countless wrecks, but this one was different. The design was unfamiliar, predating any human or known alien architecture in the database. "What do you think, old girl?" he murmured to his ship's AI. "Worth a look? Radiation levels are within safe parameters," the AI responded. "Hull composition suggests extreme age. Origin unknown. Recommend caution." Caution was expensive in this business, but curiosity was Evan's weakness. He suited up and prepped the tether line. 30 minutes later, he was magnetized to the derelict's hull, searching for an entry point. The ship was a mess, pockmarked with micrometeorite impacts, its hull oxidized to a sickly orange-brown. But beneath the decay, he could see the artistry of its construction, the elegant curves that spoke of a civilization that valued beauty, even in their war machines. He found a maintenance hatch near what he assumed was the stern. The locking mechanism was corroded, but his plasma cutter made quick work of it. The hatch groaned open, releasing a gust of stale, chemical-tainted air that made his suit's filters work overtime. Inside was darkness. Evan activated his helmet lights and pushed forward. Lyrian felt the vibration before she heard it. After 2,000 years of absolute stillness, even the faintest tremor was like thunder. Her consciousness, which had retreated to a dim spark to conserve what remained of her sanity, suddenly flared to full awareness. Someone was here. She tried to move, but her body refused. The chair's medical tendrils had fused with her spine long ago, and her muscles had atrophied to useless strings, but her eyes still worked. She could still see the doorway to the bridge, waiting for the impossible visitor. The light appeared first, bright, artificial, moving with purpose. Then came the figure, bipedal. Shorter than her species, but broader. The environmental suit was primitive compared to her civilization's technology, but functional. The figure stopped when it saw her. Lyraean tried to speak, but her vocal cords had rotted centuries ago. She could only stare with sunken eyes, her skeletal hand twitching slightly in what might have been a wave or simply a muscular spasm. Evan had seen many horrors in derelict ships, desiccated corpses, explosive decompressions, even the aftermath of plague ships. But nothing had prepared him for the thing in the captain's chair. It had once been alive. It still was somehow. The creature's body was a nightmare of decay, skin like old parchment stretched over visible bones, hollow eyes that somehow still held awareness. Tubes and wires connected it to the chair, pulsing with a faint bioluminescent glow. The medical interface was still functioning, keeping this poor soul locked in a prison of failing flesh, but those eyes were intelligent, aware, begging. "Oh God," Evan whispered. His hands trembled as he approached. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his humanity wouldn't allow it. This being had suffered for an eternity. He could see it in those ancient eyes. He knelt beside the chair, studying the interface. The language was alien, but the symbols followed a logic he could parse. Life support. Neural link. Emergency medical protocols locked in a feedback loop. The creature's hand moved slightly, a single skeletal finger pointing toward a panel on the chair's arm. Evan followed the gesture and saw what looked like an override switch covered in warning symbols. "You want me to shut it down?" he asked, knowing it couldn't understand his words but hoping his tone conveyed the question. The eyes closed once in what could only be a nod. Evan's throat tightened. This would end the creature's life. But looking at its condition, life was a generous term for what it was experiencing. This was mercy. "I'm sorry you had to wait so long," he said softly. "But you're not alone anymore. I'm here. My name is Evan Cross." He placed his gloved hand over the creature's skeletal fingers and pressed the override. The moment the systems disengaged, Lyrian felt the release. The pain that had been her constant companion for 2 millennia faded like morning mist. The medical interface's grip on her consciousness loosened, and for the first time in eons she felt peace. The human was still there, holding what remained of her hand. In her final moments of clarity, she understood what his presence meant. Humanity had survived. They had reached the stars. They had found her. And most importantly, they had cared enough to free her. As darkness finally claimed her, Captain Lyrian of the First Fleet allowed herself something she hadn't felt since the Battle of the Dying Suns: hope. Not for herself, but for the universe that could produce a species capable of such compassion. The last thing she saw was the human's face through his helmet, tears streaming down his cheeks as he held vigil for a stranger from a civilization dead long before his was born. Evan stayed with her until the end. When the last light faded from those ancient eyes, he carefully disconnected the medical interface and closed her eyelids with a gentleness usually reserved for human dead. He found a cargo bay intact enough to serve as a resting place. Using a salvage sheet from his ship, he wrapped the body carefully, then welded a memorial plate to the bulkhead above her. The words were in English, but he hoped the sentiment transcended language. Captain Lyrian, unknown date to 2847 CE. She endured beyond measure. May she finally rest. Before he left the derelict, Evan downloaded what he could from the ship's logs. The technology was ancient, but the data was priceless. History of a civilization that had risen and fallen before humanity had even discovered fire. As the meridian pulled away, Evan took one last look at the rusted tomb. He had come looking for salvage. Instead, he had found something more valuable: a reminder of why humanity explored the stars. Not for conquest or profit, but for connection. To find those lost in the darkness and tell them, in whatever way possible, that they were not forgotten, that someone had heard their silent screams, that someone had cared enough to answer.